Prepare to have your mind blown by this staggering fact. Peaceful protests, the cornerstone of democratic expression, can cost taxpayers millions, even billions of dollars. Yes, you heard that right. Peaceful protests have always been a powerful tool for driving social change. They give voice to the voiceless, bring urgent issues to the forefront, and can ultimately shape the course of history. From the civil rights movement to the climate change protests, peaceful demonstrations have left indelible marks on our society. But here's a shocking statistic that might surprise you. The cost of these peaceful protests to taxpayers can be astronomical. This isn't about the damage caused by a rogue few who might turn to violence or vandalism. No, we're talking about the costs that come with the very nature of these large-scale demonstrations. Consider the resources required to manage these events. Law enforcement officers must be mobilized to maintain order and protect protesters. Then, there's the cleanup. Streets, parks, and public spaces often require significant cleanup efforts after a demonstration. Add to that the cost of potential disruptions to businesses and daily life, and the bill starts to stack up. And let's not forget about the legal costs. Arrests during protests can lead to court cases, which require time and money to process. Even when protests lead to policy changes, implementing these new laws and regulations comes with its own price tag. So while the right to protest is a fundamental part of democracy, it's also a costly one. It's a testament to the value we place on freedom of speech and assembly, but it does make you wonder about the hidden costs of peaceful protests. Now that we have set the stage, let's dive into the top 5 most expensive peaceful protests in the last 5 years. Starting our countdown at number 5, we have the protest that echoed through the streets of Elizabeth City, North Carolina. In the wake of the tragic shooting of Andrew Brown Jr., a 42-year-old black man and father of 7, the city became a ground zero for peaceful protests demanding justice and transparency. The cause of this protest was clear-cut, a community yearning for answers. The family of Andrew Brown Jr., backed by their lawyers and civil rights attorney Ben Crump, sought the release of body camera footage to shed light on the circumstances of the fatal shooting. The sheriff's department and the family's lawyers had clashing views on the investigation's progress, fueling the fire of public discontent. So, how much did this peaceful protest cost the taxpayers? It's a complex question. The cost of a protest isn't merely measured in physical damages or overtime pay for law enforcement. There are hidden costs too, such as the impact on local businesses, the strain on city resources, and the emotional toll on the community. While an exact figure is difficult to pin down, the cost of this protest was undeniably significant. In the aftermath of the protest, the city of Elizabeth City faced the challenge of healing and rebuilding. But it wasn't all bleak. The protest sparked a renewed push for police reform, both locally and nationally. Attorney General Merrick Garland rescinded restrictions that limited federal investigations of police departments, paving the way for greater accountability and reform. A small silver lining in an otherwise heartbreaking situation. And so, the 5th most expensive protest in recent history wasn't just costly in terms of dollars and cents, it was also a stark reminder of the price we pay when justice and transparency are lacking. Moving on to the 4th most expensive protest. At number 4 on our list is the protest that erupted in the wake of the tragic shooting of Andrew Brown Jr. in North Carolina. This event sparked outrage and fueled a wave of demonstrations demanding justice and police accountability. The cost of these protests was substantial, with expenses including law enforcement overtime, property damage, and legal fees. The calculation of these costs is complex and multifaceted, taking into account not just visible damages, but also the less tangible impacts. These include the diversion of public resources, the economic disruption caused by prolonged unrest, and the societal cost of strained police-community relations. The after effects of the protest were far-reaching and profound. It led to a renewed push for police reform, resulting in the revocation of Trump-era restrictions that had limited the Justice Department's ability to reform troubled police departments. The aftermath of this protest is a testament to the power of collective action, even if it comes at a high cost. It underscores the importance of peaceful protest as a catalyst for change, reminding us that the cost of silence can be far greater. And now, the top 3 most expensive protests. Here we are at the top 3. The protests that shook the world and cost a fortune are... Starting at number 3, we have the protests sparked by the fatal shooting of Andrew Brown Jr. in North Carolina in 2021. This devastating event triggered a wave of peaceful protests demanding transparency and justice. However, the cost of these protests was staggering. With law enforcement agencies on full alert, the expenditure skyrocketed. The costs of overtime pay for officers, logistical expenses, and property damages ran into millions of dollars. The aftermath of these protests led to significant changes in local law enforcement policies and practices. Moving on to the second most expensive protest, we revisit the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict in 2020. The blockade of the Lachin corridor by Azerbaijan led to severe shortages of food and medical supplies, sparking protests around the world. The international community was forced to intervene with humanitarian aid, diplomatic pressure, and peacekeeping efforts. The cost of these interventions, combined with the economic impact of the blockade, resulted in an astronomical price tag. The fallout from this protest continues to be felt today, with ongoing diplomatic tensions and a humanitarian crisis that is far from resolved. Finally, we arrive at the most expensive protest in recent history: the nationwide protests against police brutality in the United States, triggered by high-profile cases of police violence in 2021. These protests were massive in scale, spanning across multiple cities and states, and lasted for several months. The cost of managing these protests was immense. Law enforcement agencies incurred heavy costs in terms of manpower, logistics, and equipment. Additionally, there were substantial indirect costs, such as those related to property damages and business disruptions. The aftermath of these protests has led to significant changes in police reforms, with the introduction of new policies aimed at increasing accountability and transparency. These protests have left an indelible mark on history, but at what cost? As we have seen, peaceful protests, while vital for social change, come with a hefty price tag. They've shown us that the cost of free speech isn't always free. From the fifth most expensive protest, with its layers of complexity and far-reaching implications, to the very top of our list, where the damages soared into the billions, each event has had a significant financial impact. The aftermath of these protests isn't just measured in dollars and cents, but in the societal changes they bring about, the discussions they spark, and the policies they influence. The financial implications, however, are substantial and cannot be overlooked. They include not just the immediate costs of managing the protests themselves, but also the long-term costs of rebuilding, repairing, and addressing the root causes of the discontent. Remember the fourth most costly protest. Its effects are still being felt today, with ongoing discussions about how to better manage such events in the future. The third most expensive protest, on the other hand, led to a series of policy changes and reforms, demonstrating that protests can indeed be the catalyst for significant change. As for the top two, they are stark reminders of how quickly costs can escalate in the face of widespread unrest. Their impacts continue to ripple through our society and economy. It's important that we understand these financial implications, not to deter peaceful protests, but to better prepare for them. By understanding the cost, we can ensure that the voices of the protesters are heard without undue burden on the taxpayer. This understanding also encourages us to think critically about the causes of these protests and to seek solutions that address these issues head-on. After all, a society that can peacefully protest is a society that can change for the better. That's our rundown of the top 5 most expensive peaceful protests in recent years. As always, knowledge is power, and being informed helps us all make better decisions for our future. Thank you for watching. Do subscribe, follow, like, comment, and share this video. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay tuned for more eye-opening content.